On everyone, it's Nathan. I am just doing a quick response. It's an opinion. Uh, it's a Western opinion. I'm not trying to be overly cosmopolitan or anything else right now. Um, and this is, should Israel respond or retaliate back against the retaliation, against a retaliation, against a retaliation for uh, what's it called? You know, um, Iran's uh, long-range strike against Israel. Um, so this is interesting. The first things that come to my mind, intuitively, trying to be as much apolitical, a sort of free citizen who both trusts and distrusts my own government, is that if you are going to try and argue that Israel is unbeatable and that they won't take losses, we're already seeing that planes and helicopters and armored vehicles can be shot down, they can be seized, and their troops and their people can be killed, in addition to their citizens. And so this sort of immediate plane that opens up, which is this idea that if you advocate for conflict that necessarily goes longer, necessarily gets wider, that's necessarily going to instigate, and it should be understood that the intention is to instigate a response or a broader response that leads to these sort of things which are offensive and which pull someone into the conflict, right? And so me being sort of trying to not be too brash or too bullish on what Western diplomacy is capable of, I also want to take that one idea and sort of table it for a second and say, well, look, I as a person who feels like my tax dollars and my representative government, who at the end of the day funds and determines a large way that our security presence and our defensive presence in the world is known and how our diplomacy works, have we been the ones that led to the situation? And are we required to give something back? Would that, even in theory, is that tenable or is that viable? And I would say, first and foremost, it seems like from a theory standpoint, there's nothing in history or in literature which shows that these sort of concessions, especially given the geopolitical makeup of the region, would somehow solve for long-term issues. The argument is that Western ideology does not belong and necessarily leads to situations which are intrinsically more full of security and defense risks. And so, this is one of the things that I've been thinking about. It's just how these incremental steps, when they're tied to this idea that we have to accept conflict first and foremost, and secondly, after we accept conflict, then we can talk about diplomacy, then we can talk about a multipolar order, then we can presumably get to a point where we agree that Israel is just where Israel is and has been for the last 60 years, and everyone else is just where everyone else is at. And this is the fundamental information, like that position is the fundamental information that we should be basing things on. It's just everyone is where everyone else is at. And so I would imagine there's probably both tempers as well as strategic planning and anger, as well as frustration. I would imagine on both sides, I would hope so, and I really mean that, that when you look at what an optimal or acceptable outcome might look like, it appears that this basic fact that people are where they are, and that's the information we're going off of, we're not able to take that into account. And that, and so, from the US's perspective, one of the areas that I would like to learn more about and also be a voice in some senses against this is this idea that when we look at how policy works and diplomacy works, if we ask what people think are the most pressing concerns of the day, the things that the US does, interventionism, shouldn't be the most pressing thing that happens that day. It shouldn't be the most pressing thing that happens. And I do believe that a deeper explanation is required when that happens. Like, this is where I'd come out of my shell and turn into, Diane Sawyer's or 60 Minutes or something and say, well, look, you guys are going to have to, if me as a free person who's trying to vote for this, starry-eyed, more peaceful existence, you're going to take me over the barrel on this and tell me that I have to do it. I have to believe this and endorse it. I would be very skeptical. That would be my original position. That would be where I start at, is that, hey, this is something I haven't heard about. Maybe I should have. And so, when we're understanding what resources are in place and what resources we've leveraged and what resources created what response and all of this other stuff, and so, should Israel, if I'm offering an opinion, should Israel respond to Iran? Well, no. Like, I wouldn't support that. But I would hold that same standard, appropriation and whatever other appropriation, aside, that standard where we ask what resources are available and what resources we've leveraged and can leverage. How that conversation's been placed and how much traction and leeway these things have. How, the things that we can do multilaterally through a conflict. What a concept, right? To kind of push the ball up the hill a little bit and say, like, look, the things that we've done and the way we got here obviously is the priority because it's the priority. We can accept that, but if we're communicating now through aggression and violence, if this is the dominant, we can't interpret things any other way. There's always this, I think, a failure point that exists. So, people say shake the tree. Well, what does it mean to shake the tree? Well, first, what are you hunting? What are you hunting for? If what you're hunting for isn't strategic and it's not, then this is a complete joke, Yeah, it's a total joke. And I've said this before, I wish there was less politicization around just normal people like me in Lebanon, in Gaza, Palestine, in Yemen, in Iran, and people not being able to understand what the national, regional, and ideological strategy is because there isn't one, which sucks, by the way. That's one thing. And the other thing I think is that there's just not a lot of trust or whatever that, and I'll say this unequivocally as well, I feel for the Israeli people. I can't stop that I feel that way, but that doesn't change the objective reading that, we should be able to speak to what avenues are available that, and that should actually mean something. You want to shake the tree. You're never looking at yourself. You're never looking in the mirror. You're always just pushing forward whatever this, this like this BS agenda that you can believe is good or people interpret is good. Maybe it is, but if nothing else is getting done, you're gonna fail regardless. So that's the video.